I never saw it coming. That's probably what stings the most. For years, I thought we had this perfect life. A steady marriage, 2 kids, a nice home, the whole deal. Looking back, I wonder how much of that was real and how much was just something I convinced myself to believe. It all started innocently enough. My wife, Emma, was a teacher at the local high school. She loved her job, and I loved how passionate she was about it. We had this rhythm, work, kids, the occasional date night. But then she began to change. Subtle things at first, like coming home late or saying she had to stay after school to grade papers. I trusted her. I had no reason not to. She was my rock, my partner, and we'd been through so much together. But as the weeks passed, I couldn't shake this uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. One evening, I came home early from work, hoping to surprise her with a nice dinner. The kids were at their grandparents' for the night, so I thought we could have some much-needed time alone. But when I walked in, the house was empty. Her car was gone. I called her, but she didn't pick up. That was strange because Emma always answered, especially if I was calling after hours. I texted her, something casual like, "Hey, where are you?" But no reply. That's when my anxiety kicked in. I sat down at the dining table, just staring at my phone, waiting for the screen to light up with her response. Minutes turned into an hour. Then 2. My thoughts went wild. Was she in an accident? Was she okay? But as I scrolled through social media, desperate for a distraction, a creeping suspicion entered my mind. It wasn't until close to midnight that she finally walked through the door, looking flustered. She had some excuse about a parent-teacher conference running late. I didn't question her at the time. I wanted to believe her so badly, and she looked so tired. But something in me had shifted. I couldn't shake the feeling that Emma wasn't being honest with me. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would unravel everything I thought I knew about our life together. After that night, things between us felt different, even if we didn't say it out loud. It was like we were living in 2 separate worlds under the same roof. Emma started spending even more time at school, claiming it was a particularly busy semester. Every time I asked, she had a reason: extra tutoring sessions, meetings, or planning events. I trusted her, but the late nights became too frequent to ignore. One evening, we were sitting together after putting the kids to bed, and I casually asked her about school, trying to bring things back to normal. "How's everything going with your students?" She smiled, but there was something off about it. "It's good. Busy, though. I've been helping the new guy settle in. He's teaching history." That was the first I heard about Mr. Cooper. She mentioned his name like it was no big deal, but the way she said it stuck with me. She talked about him again the next week. How he was struggling to keep up with the curriculum. How the students liked him but didn't respect him yet. The little details added up. At first, I brushed it off. Emma had always been supportive of her colleagues, so why would this be any different? But as she brought him up more often in our conversations, I couldn't help but wonder why she talked about him so much. Every mention of him felt like a tiny jab, like there was more to the story she wasn't telling me. One day, after another long day at work, I came home to find her texting, her face lit up in a way that I hadn't seen in a while. She was smiling at her phone, that kind of smile that used to be for me. When she saw me come in, she quickly put her phone down, almost guiltily. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, but inside, I felt this tightening in my chest. "Oh, just Cooper. He's having a tough time with one of his classes. I'm helping him plan a lesson." She said it so casually, like it was no big deal, but the sinking feeling in my gut told me otherwise. I just nodded and didn't push it. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid, insecure husband, but it was like a seed had been planted, and from that moment on, I couldn't stop thinking about their friendship. Weeks passed, and her connection with Mr. Cooper only seemed to grow. She talked about him more openly now, even joked about how clueless he was with certain things. But instead of feeling reassured, I felt the opposite. Why was she sharing so much about him? One weekend, when she was supposed to be chaperoning a school event, I decided to drive by the school. I didn't know what I was expecting to find. Maybe just to see her and feel stupid for doubting her. But when I pulled up, her car wasn't in the parking lot. That's when everything changed for me. I sat there for a while, hoping she'd pull in late or that I'd see some sign I was wrong. But deep down, I knew. My mind raced with possibilities, all of them worse than the last. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was something. I didn't know what to believe anymore, and the not knowing was the worst part. When she got home later that night, I could barely look at her. She gave me the same tired smile and said something about the kids being a handful at the event. I didn't confront her. I didn't say a word about driving by the school. I just nodded and let her think everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. It hadn't been fine for a long time. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself sinking deeper into suspicion. Emma and I barely talked anymore, and when we did, it was like we were skating on the surface of things, never going deep enough to confront what was really going on. There were moments when I wanted to grab her, shake her, and demand the truth, but something always held me back. Fear, maybe. Fear that once the truth was out, everything would fall apart. I started to notice more details that didn't sit right. She'd get dressed up for teacher meetings that lasted until 11 p.m. She guarded her phone like it held national secrets, never letting it out of her sight. I wasn't proud of it, but one night while she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. My hands were shaking, and my heart was racing, half of me terrified of what I might find. The phone was locked, of course. Emma had never put a password on it before, and now here it was, one more barrier between us. I knew it was wrong to snoop, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to know if I was just being paranoid, or if my worst fears were real. I put her phone down and sat on the bed, staring at the bathroom door, listening to the sound of the shower running. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, she left early for school, and I sat in the quiet house, trying to figure out what to do. I needed proof, real proof that I wasn't just imagining things. My mind went over every little detail, piecing together all the inconsistencies, all the late nights, all the mentions of him. Mr. Cooper. Something about him made my blood boil, but I didn't even know the guy. I had only ever heard of him through Emma. That afternoon, I decided to stop by the school, unannounced. I knew it was a bold move, but I couldn't sit around doing nothing anymore. I told myself it was just to visit her, maybe take her out to lunch, but deep down, I knew I was looking for something. When I got to the school, I parked far enough away to keep an eye on things without being seen. I felt ridiculous, like some kind of detective in a cheap thriller. But there I was, waiting. It was quiet at first, just teachers leaving one by one as the day wrapped up. Then I saw her. She was walking out of the building with him. Mr. Cooper. They were laughing, standing close, closer than I'd ever seen her stand next to any other male colleague. I watched them walk to his car together, and my heart sank. She didn't get in with him, but they stood there talking for what felt like forever. The way she smiled at him, it wasn't just friendly, it was more. And in that moment, I knew. I couldn't take it anymore. That evening, I waited for her to come home. I paced the living room, my mind racing with what I'd seen. I was ready to confront her, ready to lay everything out on the table. But when she walked through the door, all those words I had planned just evaporated. She looked exhausted, her hair pulled back, her eyes dull. She kissed me on the cheek like everything was fine, and I froze. I couldn't do it. Not yet. Instead, I asked her how her day was, just like always. She told me about a tough student, an upcoming exam, the usual teacher stuff. But all I could think about was how she had been with him, laughing, smiling, connecting with someone in a way she hadn't with me in months. That night, I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. There was no denying it now. Emma was slipping away from me, and I had no idea how to stop it. The hardest part? I still loved her. Even after everything, even knowing there was someone else, maybe more than just someone. I still wanted to fight for us. But I didn't know how to do it when the truth was still hiding in the shadows. I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The days that followed were a blur of tension and silence. I couldn't stop thinking about the way Emma looked at Mr. Cooper, how she laughed with him like they had some private joke, a connection I wasn't part of. I needed to know the truth, and I couldn't sit on this any longer. The suspicion was eating me alive, tearing at every part of me, making it impossible to focus on anything else. One evening, after the kids were in bed, I finally worked up the nerve to confront her. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, probably texting him, for all I knew. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my mouth was dry. I'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in my head, but none of it made me feel any more prepared. "Emma," I started, my voice tense. She looked up, her eyes questioning. "We need to talk." Her face shifted, just a flicker of something. Fear, guilt, I don't know. But she knew where this was going. "About what?" she asked, her tone too casual. I stood there for a moment, taking a deep breath. I could feel the weight of everything I was about to say pressing down on me. "About you and Mr. Cooper." The silence that followed was suffocating. She blinked, as if caught off guard, but didn't say anything at first. I watched her, waiting, hoping she'd deny it, hoping she'd give me some explanation that would make sense of everything. But the longer she stayed quiet, the more the truth started to set in. "What about him?" she finally asked, her voice soft, almost offensive. I sat down across from her, feeling the anger rising in my chest. "Don't play dumb, Emma. I saw you with him. I've seen the way you talk about him, the way you look at him. I'm not stupid." She looked away, biting her lip. For a moment, I thought maybe she'd lie, try to talk her way out of it. But then she did something I didn't expect. She nodded, her face crumpling as tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't want you to find out like this," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I didn't want it to happen at all." Her words felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I could barely breathe. I thought I'd be ready for this moment, but I wasn't. Nothing could have prepared me for the gut-wrenching feeling of hearing her admit it out loud. "How long?" was all I could manage to ask. Emma wiped at her eyes, trying to compose herself. "A few months. It's not what you think." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly at that. "Not what I think. You've been sneaking around with him behind my back, Emma. What else could it possibly be?" She broke down, sobbing into her hands. "I never wanted to hurt you. I'm so sorry. I just felt so lost after everything that's happened between us. It wasn't supposed to go this far." Her words swirled around me, but I couldn't process them. All I could think about was the betrayal, the lies. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, had been having an affair, and I was standing there, watching her crumble under the weight of it. "I can't believe you," I whispered, my voice raw with pain. "I thought we were in this together. I thought we were a team." She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears, and for a moment, I saw the Emma I fell in love with, the woman who used to be my everything. But that woman was gone now, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "I don't know what to say," she choked out. "I never wanted it to come to this." I stood up, feeling the anger and sadness boiling over. "You should have thought about that before you let him into our lives, into our marriage." And with that, I left the room, the walls of our home closing in on me, suffocating me with the weight of everything that had just shattered between us. The days that followed were filled with a kind of cold, mechanical routine. I still went to work, still took care of the kids, still tried to pretend like life hadn't completely crumbled around me. But every time I looked at Emma, all I saw was the betrayal, the broken promises, the lies. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was brief, functional, about the kids, about dinner, about chores. The elephant in the room was too big, too painful to talk about. Every time I saw her, my chest tightened with a mix of anger and sadness. I told her I needed space to think. She offered to stay with her sister for a few days, and I agreed. When she left, the house felt hollow, like the life had been sucked out of it. The kids asked where Mommy was, and I gave them some excuse about her helping Aunt Lily for a few days. The lie tasted bitter in my mouth, but I didn't know how to explain the truth. I was numb, drifting through each day like a ghost. I'd replay our confrontation in my mind over and over, wondering what I could have done differently, wondering if there was something I could have done to stop this from happening. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Something had been broken between us long before Mr. Cooper entered the picture. We'd been drifting apart for months, maybe years, and I hadn't even noticed. Or maybe I had noticed but hadn't known how to fix it. I started to question everything. Was it my fault? Had I been too focused on work, Too distant? Had I missed the signs that she was unhappy? Or was this just who she was now? A woman who could cheat, lie, and pretend everything was fine. I couldn't keep it all bottled up anymore. The silence was unbearable, and I needed to talk to someone who could help me make sense of the chaos inside my head. So, I called my best friend, Josh, the guy who had been my best man at the wedding, who'd known Emma and me from the very beginning. When I told him everything, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the disbelief in his voice when he finally spoke. Man, I don't even know what to say. I'm so sorry. I sighed, rubbing my temples. I just don't understand how we got here. I thought we were okay. My voice broke, and I could barely get the words out. I thought she loved me. She does, dude. She probably still does, in some messed up way. But sometimes people lose themselves, you know? They make stupid choices. Josh's words were meant to comfort me, but they only deepened the confusion. How could she still love me and do this? How could she destroy everything we'd built together? I don't know what to do, I admitted, my voice trembling. Do I forgive her? Do I try to fix this? Josh was quiet for a moment before he finally spoke. I can't tell you what to do, man, but I think you need to figure out if you can live with this. If you can ever trust her again. And that was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? Could I ever trust her again? A few days later, Emma came back from her sister's, looking pale and drained. The kids ran to her, hugging her tightly, and for a brief moment, I saw the old Emma, the one who was always so full of love for our children. But that moment passed quickly, replaced by the cold reality of what we were now. She asked if we could talk, and I agreed, though my stomach twisted into knots at the thought of having this conversation. We sat in the living room, the space between us feeling like a chasm. She looked down at her hands, her voice quiet. I don't even know where to start. Why? I asked, my voice harsh and filled with pain. Why him? Why now? She flinched at the directness of my question, but didn't shy away from it. I don't have a good answer. I felt lost. I was lonely, even when we were together. I felt like you were slipping away, and I didn't know how to reach you. And then Cooper. He paid attention to me, made me feel wanted again. I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the wave of emotions crashing over me. So, what? You decided to blow up our family because you weren't getting enough attention? Tears filled her eyes, but I didn't feel the same sympathy for her that I once had. I felt cold. I wasn't thinking straight. I know I screwed up, and I hate myself for it. But I still love you, and I want to fix this. The words hung in the air between us, but they felt empty, like they didn't carry the same weight they once had. I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell at her for what she had done to us. But instead, I just stood up, unable to stay in the same room any longer. I don't know if I can fix this, Emma, I said quietly before walking out, leaving her alone with her guilt. As weeks passed, the tension between us was unbearable. Emma tried to make things right. She apologized, cried, promised me she'd cut all contact with Mr. Cooper. She even offered to quit her job at the school. But every time I looked at her, all I could think about was the betrayal. I couldn't touch her, couldn't even stand to be near her without the anger rising up inside me. The worst part was, I still loved her. That was the cruelest twist of it all. I loved her, but I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. One night, after another argument that ended in silence, I found myself standing outside, staring up at the stars. I wanted to feel something, anything other than this constant numbness that had taken over my life. I wanted to know what the right answer was, whether to fight for our marriage or to walk away. But there was no clear answer. Just more questions, more pain, and it wasn't long before our kids started picking up on the tension. They were young, but they weren't stupid. They could feel the shift in our home, the cold distance between their mom and dad. Our oldest, Sam, asked me one night, "Why are you and Mommy always so quiet? Are you mad at her?" I felt my throat tighten. How do you explain something like this to a child? How do you tell them that the person they look up to, the person who is supposed to be their foundation, has shattered everything? No, buddy, I lied. We're just going through something. But it's not your fault, okay? We both love you. He didn't seem convinced, but he nodded, hugging me tight. And in that moment, I realized that whatever I decided to do next, it couldn't just be about me and Emma. It had to be about them too, our kids, our family. The more distant I became, the more desperate Emma got. She tried everything: romantic gestures, therapy sessions, long letters explaining her side of things. She was fighting for us, but I couldn't bring myself to fight alongside her. One night, she broke down completely. "Please," she sobbed, "please don't give up on us. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy, I'll change jobs, I'll give you space. Just don't leave." Her words broke something inside me. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to lose the life we'd built. But the thought of staying and pretending like everything was okay felt like an impossible task. "I need more time," I told her. I don't know if I can ever move past this." Her face crumpled, and she nodded. But I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear that I was already slipping away from her. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, I received an unexpected call one afternoon. It was from a woman I didn't know, a voice I'd never heard before. "Is this James?" she asked cautiously. "Yeah, who's this?" I'm Mr. Cooper's wife," she said, her voice shaky. "I'm sorry to call you like this, but I just found out about everything, and I didn't know who else to turn to." My stomach dropped. Mr. Cooper's wife. Of course, there was another layer to this nightmare. She told me how she had found messages between her husband and Emma, and how she had been blindsided, just like me. We talked for over an hour, sharing our stories, our pain, our disbelief that this had happened to us. By the time the call ended, I felt more confused than ever. Knowing that there was someone else out there going through the same hell didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made everything feel more real. After that call, I felt like I was suffocating. I couldn't stay in this limbo anymore, stuck between forgiveness and betrayal, love and hate. Something had to change. I sat down with Emma one evening, my heart heavy with the weight of what I was about to say. "I think we need to talk about divorce." Her face went pale, and for a moment, she looked like she might faint. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No, please, James. Don't say that." But I couldn't back down now. "Emma, I don't know how to move forward from this. I don't know how to trust you again. Maybe we need to accept that this is the end." She broke down, begging me to reconsider, telling me she would do anything to fix it. But for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of calm. I didn't want this to be the end, but maybe it already was dying a last-ditch effort. Emma gave me an ultimatum. "Give me 6 months," she said, her voice trembling. 6 months to prove that I can make this right. If you still feel the same after that, I won't fight you on the divorce. But please, don't walk away just yet." I hesitated, torn between my desire to end the pain and my lingering love for her. Could 6 months really change anything? Could she undo the damage that had been done? Reluctantly, I agreed. 6 months, I said. But if nothing changes, we go our separate ways. It was a fragile truce, and neither of us knew if it would be enough to save what was left of our marriage. The next few months were a roller coaster of emotions. Some days, we'd make progress, talking openly in therapy, reconnecting over shared memories, trying to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. But other days, the resentment would bubble up again, and we'd fall back into silence. Emma was doing everything she could to prove that she was committed to us. She quit her job, cut off all contact with Mr. Cooper, and devoted herself to our family. She was trying, and I could see that, but I wasn't sure if it was enough. The scars ran too deep, and sometimes I wondered if they would ever truly heal. As the 6-month mark approached, I found myself standing at a crossroads. I had spent months wrestling with my feelings, trying to decide if I could forgive Emma, if I could let go of the betrayal and rebuild our life together. On the last night of the 6 months, Emma and I sat down together, the weight of everything hanging between us. "So," she said quietly, "do you think we have a chance?" I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so many years, the woman who had broken my heart but was still here, fighting for us. I didn't know if we could ever go back to the way things were, but I also didn't know if I was ready to let go of everything we had. "I don't know what the future holds," I said slowly, "but I'm willing to try if you are." She nodded, tears in her eyes, And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe we could heal. Maybe we couldn't. But at least for now, we were willing to try. And maybe that was enough.